Now we're going to do the panel discussion about the fund. Yeah, and actually, in this particular discussion, we want to give a little bit more color on what we're thinking about how we're going to be not only setting up the funds that are going to be investing into the ecosystem, deploying tokens into the ecosystem, but also give you an opportunity to kind of ask questions about how that process is going to work. One of the things is we've been working with a number of advisors on this process. There's been a lot of encouragement to look for a new model and not just do the existing, what's already been done. We're trying to learn from the past in how fund management is done in VCs and in subscriptions and LPs, at the same time looking at how we can take tokens to the next level. So, Andrew, let's start with you. Give us a little bit about you've written some Medium articles and there's some data about this out there, but just give us kind of the top level.
Well, this started, this is a little bit gained down a little bit on the mic. It seems to be reverbing a little bit on me. This started about pretty much running around the blockchain, listening to, all the interactions that we've had with venture capitalists and that. And then everybody from the blockchain, you've got two totally separate viewpoints that VCs have had 40-something years of analytics. They can make the best decisions. They know how to separate the wheat from the chaff. They're going to invest in the most likely ones to succeed from their point of view. Then you talk to most people on the blockchain and they're like, oh, those guys don't know what they're doing. If they were baseball players, they'd be thrown out of the league, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They need to get it to what I call the hive mind, the collective that can rip through a lot of data in a heartbeat and pick, these are the ones we want to do. I'm for video games. That's a competition. Let's gamify it and put them together. And then we started analyzing that. There's 3-4 Medium articles that I wrote, one of them which talked about Run for the unicorns, and the first one was blockchain versus the VC, where I detail what we're doing here, which is breaking up 10 investment funds with trying to do it in tokens, so we can, everything's token based, but I try to convert it current value. 10 billion tokens per fund in these 10 funds. We're going to give 9 of them to, not give them, there's criteria for them to become a manager of those funds where our ecosystem will believe that they would be a smart person or smart group to manage that fund. And then the 10th one is going to the blockchain. To all of our token holders will be able to manage that fund as its fund manager to make those. So we're going to see over time who's the better fund manager. And I see it as kind of like the VCs teaching the hive mind how to do it right, maybe. But we'll see. It's a game. And for us, it's getting more eyes, more reasons to look at how we can improve our ecosystem over time. So with that, on the panel with me here, we've got Enrique Rodriquez, which I sat them down and said, nobody can monitor this stuff for us out there the way it needs to be because the blockchain's too new. Nobody knows how to do that. We sat down, we talked about how they can verify everything that's happening out of those funds plus everything that we've said in the white paper. All of our tokens slowly trickling into the ecosystem need to be tracked. Then we've got Frank Amato. I don't want to blow that. Frank Amato, he graciously is sitting up here because he's been an investor and an analyst. I'll let him talk about his background, and I'll let you state why you're on the panel. so I don't misrepresent anything.
Sure, sure. I currently am an angel investor and have a small VC firm, so called Block 5, and we look at a variety of projects and invest in. We look at a handful of projects, invest, we advise as well, that's my background.
So he's actually very new to this concept of a token-based investment fund. The second article that the first one evolved into was the virtuous circle of a token-based investment fund, where I theorized what would have happened if Kevin Backus used a Xbox token instead of the dollar bill, what would happen to the entire fund. And what it boils out to is the dollar bill cannot go up in value, the token can, and if anybody in the ecosystem finds that spark, it improves the value of everybody in the ecosystem. So they're more likely to work together on things. And then we have, if you grab your microphone up there, this is Rob Rice. He is definitely one of the original founders of Convergence. And he is going to be one of our 10 fund managers, and I'll let him pick up and talk about that for a second, and then we'll get back and just start ripping this apart.
Thank you, Andy. So I'm kind of excited about this. When you look at how venture capital works, especially for the game industry, it's very difficult trying to get funding for a game. People don't like to fund specific titles. They usually go for more technology plays. So a lot of times indie developers in particular will go to somewhere like Kickstarter or something like that and spend a lot of time and effort trying to build up enough momentum and raise a little bit of capital. And in some cases, we have runaway hits like Star Citizen or something that raises an obscene amount of money. And then the next question is, where did the money go? Where's the status of the product? When's it going to come out? It's been like 25 years now. We're still waiting for Duke Nukem number, whatever it is. So how do you fix some of these things? And at the same time, how do you also cultivate kind of the ecosystem that Andy's building? So this idea of the token-based kind of fund with multiple funds kind of a little bit competing with themselves, as well as some that's kind of driven by the community itself, I think will help find a lot of teams and content will get more attention faster, and there'll be much more in the sense of some transparency, some tracking, and then things and teams that are doing well, there's going to be rewards based in there, and it's going to ultimately, as Andy said, kind of the rising tide will float all of our 3D boats. So
basically, where we're at, I'm going to do Jay a favor because he doesn't like me talking about verbal deals that we've cut at conferences under the auspice of drinks. So I think I can legitimately say, I know I can, the 8 of the 10 funds we have earmarked for notable groups, notable people that are looking into what it is, why it is, how we're doing it, are the tokens on exchanges yet? Those are the kinds of questions that we've got. We've actually got people that are lining up to have all the criteria met for being a fund manager, which one of the pieces of the criteria is they have to be a token holder of no less than 200 million tokens that they have put on the shelf in cold storage, and they cannot touch those tokens the entire time that they are on the program to be a fund manager. And we'll get into the details of what's the rewards of being a fund manager. But we have some very significant groups looking at that, and we also have our token holders as the 10th one. These are being analyzed and papered up by the attorneys, and we're trying to work out all the details of what are the rules of the game. How do they gamify all of this? And Enrique, you're on here just as corporate governance external auditors. So if you want to add a little bit of what Skylar said and what your thoughts are or what we're doing, and we'll kind of get into the game aspects, and we're going to try to make some of the rules right here now.
Yeah, picking up a little bit of what Skylar said, I think it's really important that we give just investors and everybody in the ecosystem just the utmost transparency, especially when it comes to the token and the value that's being created within the ecosystem. So it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out and how, other companies may pick this up as far as like the blockchain auditing and the different funds. And so I know as far as CCG, we're really excited to just get started. And, it's the first time something like this has really been done that I've heard of anyway.
In such an old industry as the blockchain.
Yeah, right. And so, no, we're really excited to get started.
I take it you've been around funds for quite a while. Could you explain a little bit of the detail of what they call the 2%, 20% model? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
2% management fees.
Yeah, 20%, yeah.
And what is it, 20% carry?
Yeah, so typically a hedge fund would charge a 2% fee annually based on funds under management, and then they would take a 20% of profit on any funds that they made for you. Is that a model that you're looking at for?
That is exactly the rule of thumb model that we've built this around.
Yeah.
So all fund managers would get 2% of the funds that they have deployed annually, broken down to a monthly thing, but they get paid in tokens. Now,
is it safe to say this is sort of a master node system where 200 million, oh, got it, okay.
Yes. So they get paid in tokens on that, on a normal 2%, 20% fund. And then on a monthly basis, what we have set up in the rules, and we're trying to get what are these criteria, and we've got to get all 9 minds together, plus us are all 10 minds together to figure out that. But we want to give an extra 2% per month. That means annual 2% per month, so 2% divided by 12, to the one fund that outperformed the others in ecosystem beneficial activities. Those have to get defined. And that's what I'm trying to get other people to define, so we don't define it for it, but we're trying to get those defined of ecosystem beneficial activities. Who got the most notoriety for the ecosystem, the most press, the most goodwill out there? Has nothing to do with profit into their fund. The other piece of the gamification part that we're doing is an extra 10% at the end of the year for the fund that brought in the most profit of the 10 funds. That manager gets an extra 10%. So this should make some good, camaraderie fighting amongst everybody, because if Rob makes his fund go through the roof, he just benefited everybody else in the ecosystem. But if little Tommy out there tweets out something because he did something really cool and it goes viral, little Tommy made everybody in the ecosystem benefit because it adds value to the ecosystem. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here and articulate out. We've set up the wallets, the funds are in the wallets, and we put up some guidelines. The only guidelines that we have that we've locked in stone is the fund manager gets 30%, it gets access to deploy 30% under the guidelines of, I got to do this in tokens, 10 million tokens to 500 million tokens. Yeah. 10 million tokens to 500 million tokens per investment. And after 6 months, if there's the follow-on investment, can be 1 billion tokens into one entity. And that's all each fund is allowed to do in one entity. But nothing in our rules said all funds couldn't pile up onto the same thing and do what they're allowed to do as a maximum to everything. And I see it as, we've got 10 minds together, maybe 4 of them like this project, 3 of them like that project, that they all come together and put little bits in there. But we're also now on the other side of the coin, the investment. They can't just take those tokens, because you don't, in an ecosystem, in a video game ecosystem, virtual currency, you don't want anybody to dump a whole bunch of virtual currency out on the market at one time. So they can't have access to 100% of what was just invested in them. They can only trade, I think that's the right term, isn't it? Is there an SEC? Never. They can only trade up to 10% of their holdings a month. And not 10% of what was invested in them, 10% of what they currently have in their holdings a month. And that'll get them more than a year's worth of runway, which is the intent. And hopefully that helps them get other people to come in and help out, because we don't want to be the only skin in their game either. But that's what we're trying to do, is give all of these guys out there more than enough runway to succeed, to help us succeed, we help them succeed, and everybody becomes a big, nice community. So
that's the lockup period then?
I guess that would be the lockup period as you invest it, is once a month to allow them to transfer out for whatever value they want to transfer out. They get 10% of what was invested into them, they get to trade.
And in that case, those are maximums. If the fund has other milestones, it just can't exceed that, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. So.
Right. It also supports a lot more planning and transparency on the side of the developers. They're not going to be out buying Lamborghinis on day one, wait till you publish the game first, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, especially if they're not like Matchbox. Well, I think one of the things when we're looking at, deployment of these resources, the key is that we've got enough visibility for each of the projects that are getting, as well as not so much going into the ecosystem that we're overwhelming the value of the token. We don't want to force the value of the token down because we're making so many investments, right?
Oh, right. We definitely don't want to force the value of the ecosystem itself down by putting a bunch out there. We don't want them to do. But the way we see that, when little bitty spikes start happening, as in every single ecosystem out there, spikes start happening, people will see, wait a minute, I thought I just had this much value in my holdings, and now all of a sudden it's this much. Oh, well, maybe it's better for me not to blow it out, what my current monthly allotment is on that Lamborghini. Maybe I'll hold that back because next month I could get 10 Lamborghinis instead of one. Or a nice pool or whatever. That's because it makes them, because the tokens can go up in value, it makes them hodlers.
So we're going to have the visibility for all these disclosures happening and reporting on that, but we're also in basically kind of the exact opposite of VC. Rather than incentivizing you to spend all your money so that you get further dilution by needing more, you're going to be incentivized to be efficient and using them with as much effectiveness as possible as you're deploying them. So you're going to be wanting to see that increase in value, and so you're going to be incentivized to not spend those.
Exactly. As an investment, you're incentivized not to. So our questions to Frank here, because he's been on the VC side of the what's your thoughts about the overall scheme, the overall way we're mapping it out? What holes have we missed? Because these are questions I keep asking, and people are like, can I get on the team? Oh. What holes have we missed?
As far as the token economics are concerned, I think when you're talking any currency, and this is some of the issue that a lot of people have with Bitcoin, or if you're in an environment where it's deflationary or inflationary, you tend to, as you said, you tend to not spend the currency, like the speed of flow of the currency decreases, which is generally a bad thing. So I would expect that you would want people freely using your tokens rather than just holding them purely for speculative investment purposes.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We want them moving. I was in a meeting with some fairly high profile. I was pulled into a meeting with some fairly high profile VCs and a very high profile new
Just don't say any words. Yeah.
that they were getting an excessive amount of cash, over and above what they actually needed. And they were asked, what are they going to do with it? And they're like, oh, we're going to take that cash and we're going to invest it in all these startups that help our ecosystem. And I was quiet during the whole meeting up until that question. And I'm like, can I ask a real stupid question? I'm like, what? If you spent all this time and effort to get all that cash, and you've got this mountain of tokens over here, why don't you use them to invest into your startups and your ecosystem? Oh, well, they need cash. They need cash. So you don't think your tokens have value? It's like you're wanting the churn in the ecosystem. You want your tokens to be moving around in the ecosystem between everybody. You want to get it in there. You want to incentivize them to actually go and get them and move them. Cash should be your last resort. Because you shouldn't have to spend that to help push and once you get the engine going, you shouldn't have to spend that cash to help keep your engine moving and the ecosystem and growing. It should all be tokens. That's kind of our put. There's several economists in the industry that I've had talks with on this that have said the same thing. It's like, yeah, cash is the last resort. Why use that when you have a whole ecosystem that should thrive around your token? Get them used to using it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. The ecosystem is going to be the key. And if you have the right ecosystem, I don't personally think we're going to have 6,000 tokens or more that survive in this world. And right, if you take a look at now, a lot of the trading that's done across platform, a lot of people move back there. They're jumping in and out of tokens, but they're moving back to Bitcoin or some other type of stable coin like a Tether. But with the right ecosystem, absolutely, then you can have a thriving token that you could use to. You mentioned companies like BitMEX has BitMEX Labs now. They do something similar. They're investing in projects that they deem healthy for their own ecosystem, and that's a common occurrence that we see in the space.
I'd like to ask Jay if you could give Ron Miners the microphone if you've got any comments on video game ecosystems with virtual currencies, not even talking about tokens, virtual currencies, and that your experience over the last 1,000 years, of video game world.
This is absolutely a topic that's been very much in my mind, and the term ecosystem as applied to communities and games was first used by a lady by the name of Amy Jo Kim in a talk she gave at GDC in about 2002, and it was a revelation for me, and one of the things that I've tried to kind of incorporate in my understanding and work with communities sort of since then. And she was talking about The Sims, which I later worked on, but she was talking about how one segment of the community would create content, and that content would have to be reviewed, which would require another segment of the community. That would all have to be put up on a website, so that would require another ecological niche, and eventually it would hit the consumers. And so what you're looking at, and ideally, you've got the company on the end of this, you've got Maxis or whoever, looking at this whole thing and taking part, helping to celebrate the positive aspects of it, having recognition for the creators so as to incentivize other creators. So the whole notion of an ecology in a community is absolutely essential. And one of the things that when Andy and I first started talking, one of the things that, and I'm going to talk about later, one of the things that's so exciting to me is this notion of ecology just is a virus throughout the whole system. And it all sort of feeds convergence, it all sort of feeds other pieces. And my role is going to be to help sort of shape the structures so that the various contributions spark other contributions and other successes and become part of the messaging strategy, and so that it all sort of works together as a whole. But again, sort of that notion of an ecology is absolutely central to stuff that I've been doing for years.
You use all the pretty words that I just call mob mentality.
That's because somehow or other I got sucked into trying to figure out how mob mentality works. And and have a lot of fun doing it. So, that answer your question?
Oh yeah.
All right.
thank you for helping our panel here.
Sure.
Look at a lot of the flavor, because virtual economies have existed for
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
20, how many years?
That was another one. I was actually just thinking about that. Ted Castronova gave a keynote at Austin Game Conference in about 2004 about the virtual economy and WoW. He was one of the first people who, World of Warcraft, he was one of the first people who started he's an economics professor at University of Indiana. So he was one of the first sort of reputable people who started looking at these game economies and saying, hey, there's a lot of value going on here. There's a lot of really important stuff, and this is going to have all sorts of real-world implications.
That was back in the time when Brock Pierce was making a market in it.
Yeah, absolutely so. Yeah.
That, EverQuest and all that. I mean, these economies flow. I mean, that's insane to me. Here's a guy, Brock Pierce, that had Goldman Sachs back up, invest in a Chinese video game gold farming operation because there's so much cash to be made in there. And that was the secondary markets.
Yeah,
and video games kind of came into that kicking and screaming a little bit, if I remember.
Yeah, there was not a whole lot of love there. But you know, that's one of and it's another piece of, you know, convergence really of bringing the blockchain and bringing the token into the gaming economy, is that it does two things. It both sort of keeps the economy within the ecosystem, as opposed to sort of bleeding out to outsiders, but it also makes the rewards for participants that much clearer and that much more sort of incentivizing. I mean, you know, if you're an independent developer, you know, and as has been pointed out, you know, it's a tough road to get your product out there. Mm-hmm. But if we're providing a system that's integrated with a lot of marketing muscle, an in-game economy, an economy that comes out of the game as well, then, you know, we're going to be, I think, a lot more attractive to a lot of developers and give them an opportunity to really sort of create exciting stuff. Note, that then creates a much more positive experience for all of our gamers, right? So it becomes a center of attention and excitement for them, becomes a one-stop that's really exciting for them, which makes it that much more exciting for developers and so forth. You know, so ideally the system works.
These are upward spirals that feed amongst themselves, that just start feeding each other, kind of like the two upward spirals that I saw last year of Bitcoin rising, feeding the ICO market, which was rising, which feeding the Bitcoin and the Ethereum market, feeding the ICO, and those things kind of started spinning up out of control, a virtuous circle, versus what happened in the mortgage crisis, which is a vicious circle. So we're going to try to ride this thing, this tornado, upwards to where it can go, as we evolve the whole ecosystem, the whole video game ecosystem, from the consumer side to the out-of-home entertainment side, and they're together. So,
okay. I think we're just about out of time, but if there's any more questions, I wanted to give the audience last shot at this. If there's inquiries for the panels, we have it. Going once?
Any questions for the panel? Or have we just mesmerized you all? I think that's a good panel. If everybody's kind of like, wow, this is cool. I like this.
So I always like to have a panel of this level of distinction give us one prediction. That let's do it short term. Let's not go that 5 years. In 1 year, what do you think the outcome of this approach is going to be?
I think everybody knows my outcome.
Yeah, you're going to be to the moon. Yeah.
Well, it's not to the moon. It's more that the open source organization around a video game ecosystem is going to eat the non-open source video ecosystem, from the consumer side to the out-of-home side. That we're going to notice major turns over the next year because of that.
Okay. Normally I'd put in one sentence, but that's okay. Go ahead.
With it being the first, I think it has a lot of potential to kind of change the game, change the ecosystem, especially in the video game industry. So I'm very optimistic about it and just glad to be a part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, as Andrew and I discussed, like with the correct app in place, like the halo of the environment or ecosystem, then the sky's the limit, effectively.
So the tipping point will be the content.
Yeah.
It may take a little longer than a year, but I think if the model proves itself out, you'll probably see a shift with limited partners demanding that institutional venture capitalists adopt something similar. Because honestly, the rate of success for most VCs is, what, 1 in 20 or more. So that whole industry needs to be disrupted, and this might be the first step. So maybe not be the PayPal mafia, but maybe we could be the new blockchain mafia? I don't know. The unicorn mafia.
The
That just
unicorn
doesn't sound
mafia.
right.
Yeah, we coined it here. So you're saying 18 months then?
What's that?
You're pushing from a year to...
Yeah, maybe a little more than a year. We'll probably need a year plus to prove it out, but I think as people start seeing how it works and kind of understand it, maybe a lot of smaller tier VCs that want to differentiate themselves will try to adopt something similar to get better successes and draw more money from the limited partners, while the larger, bigger, slower moving guys just kind of watch.
So I'm thinking we come back here in a year and see how close we are.
Let's come back here in a year and see how close we are.
Okay.
Run this
Thank you,
panel
guys.
video.
Appreciate it.